It gives me great pleasure now to introduce the moderator for the next session, which is on planning for the future, understanding globalization in the post-COVID-19 world and the investment measures needed to boost recovery of the global travel and tourism industry. The moderator for this is Professor Ian Goldin, who is the Professor of Globalization and Development at the University of Oxford and the Director of the Oxford Martin Programme on Technological and Economic. That's a long title, but I'll hand over to you now. Ian, it's all yours to take over.
Thank you very much, Rajan, and welcome to everyone that's participating in this. It's a huge pleasure to be associated with it and to have such a wonderful panel to discuss planning for the future, understanding globalization in the post-COVID-19 world and investment measures needed to boost recovery of the global travel and tourism industry. So we have a wonderful panel, and we're going to begin this panel with Minister Najib Balala, the Minister of Tourism and Wildlife in Kenya. Minister, you've been clearly devastated by the pandemic, as others have, locking down before the pandemic really struck, so putting livelihoods at stake to defend lives. Could you say something about how COVID-19's impacted on Kenya and what you're doing to try and mitigate this and to get yourselves back on your feet, and of course to support the desperately poor people who so need your income from the industry?
Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me, ITIC. So I'm here, proud that I'm participating with the good people around me, and I can see the people around us all over the screen. But yes, these unprecedented times of the pandemic has affected not only Kenya, but globally. And definitely, for us, we feel that probably this is the time we feel globalization is under threat, or there have been put some brakes on globalization. So yes, it has affected all of us, and Kenya in particular, because 10% of our GDP is tourism. And a huge percentage of people are working under this sector. And probably, and as before, everybody knows that governments never take tourism seriously. They think this is a luxury sector, that people have money, and they don't see the value chain and the effects of the value chain. It's only now we realize tourism has been impacted. And then the lady who sells milk, the farmer in the farms are affected. The service industry, the bankers, everybody, the utility companies are all affected because the sector is shut. And the number of people who have been affected is almost 11% of the formal employment. So this is huge unemployment caused by the pandemic, particularly the tourism sector. Yes, other sectors have been affected, but tourism is the worst hit. What we have done is that we have immediately the pandemic was announced, we got only one case. We announced a shutdown instantly because we wanted to contain it. Unfortunately, then there were Kenyans who were coming back into the country. They brought the virus with them, and we got affected. So the numbers have gone up. Still, it's relatively small because we have active cases of 2,000 cases, and death is less than 100. So our numbers are small, but yes, we need to contain it and not make sure that it doesn't grow. We have a curfew up to the first week of July, but I believe after July, I think we start opening up. It's tough as well to make it happen, but unfortunately, this is the current situation. We can't do anything about it, but this is the situation here we have. Unfortunately, we have not much resources to support the economy, but we try to do something. We gave $10 million to the wildlife sector, $20 million to the wildlife sector. We have allocated $40 million to the tourism sector, and $20 million, particularly for the employees in the lower cadre. So these are the efforts we are doing currently.
Thank you very much, Minister. And clearly the challenges you face are severe, both on the medical front and the economic front. Poor countries are less able to do the sorts of things that richer countries have done to support workers and their industry. I'm going to turn now to Keith Barr, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the IHG Group, incorporating, as many of the participants will know, a fantastic array of hotels, Intercontinental Region, Kempton Resorts, Crown Plaza, Holiday Inns, and many others. And clearly, you must have been devastated too by this pandemic. Could you say something about what you're doing from an investment perspective to respond to this? And in particularly in how, what tips you'd give to the participants who are deep in the industry for one of the learnings you've had? What do you think's worked and what do you think has worked perhaps less well than you would have hoped?
Well, thank you for having me here, Professor. And it's, I think we'd all admit it's been an extraordinary series of events over the recent months. And when this started, I remember having a daily conversation with my team in Greater China, where we have over 450 hotels. And when it was a China issue, and was working with them to understand how we were going to manage through the crisis, how we're going to manage through supporting our owners and our colleagues, and opening hotels in Wuhan to house frontline workers and medical professionals, and helping the hospitals be built there. And we thought it was a China problem, but then it became global, and the impact has been pretty extraordinary, and it's impacting different places in the world differently now. So China is fairly well contained. Talking with the team there last week, you kind of look at things are beginning to get back to normalcy, and you're seeing businesses begin to reopen, restaurants begin to reopen, and travel beginning to take place because there's a level of safety and security. The US, similarly, we're seeing activity beginning to tick up there, less so in Europe and Middle East and Asia. So our focus has been really, how do we support our owners and our colleagues around the world? We have over 6,000 hotels now. And when you think about that, ranging, as you pointed out, from mainstream hotels of Holiday Inn Expresses to luxury resorts and Six Senses, and they're each in a different place. And so how do we work with our owners to make sure that they can get through what is clearly the most challenging time operationally they've ever faced, with revenues dropping as an industry in some markets 80, 90, or 100%. And so we've been very focused on cost to operate, brand standards, but also then leaning into governments around the world to get government support packages. But what we're focusing right now is on recovery. And as we're getting through this, how do we help our owners reopen hotels? And how do we drive demand into our hotels responsibly, and making sure that our hotels are being operated in a way that gives that high sense of health, hygiene, and cleanliness? Because as you probably, all the guests have been talking about, all the data we're showing right now is people want to travel, but people are concerned to travel because they want to make sure it's healthy and safety. And so we have to give those visible cues in all of our hotels, whether that is personal protective equipment, increased cleaning in public spaces, associations with world-class institutions like the Cleveland Clinic, and leveraging all the resources we have to give guests a sense of it's safe to travel in the markets where it is safe to travel. Also helping our owners operate, financially stability. But now we're leaning into demand and using data and analytics to understand where do customers want to travel. And, we have some hotels where are sold out right now around the world, which amazes me, right? And these resort destinations at the high end in luxury. So we have a Six Senses in Vietnam that was sold out for most of last month. And we have beach resorts in the United States and in the Florida Panhandle being sold out too. So there is a desire for people to travel. We have to make sure that we communicate to customers how we're making it safe, and work as an industry though, because this is not an IHG issue. This is not a Marriott issue or a country. It's a tourism issue, as your previous guest pointed out. It's impacting 1 in 10 jobs globally, and we have to help get those people back to work.
Can you operate at full occupancy? I mean, can you have hotels where that you have enough restaurant space and common space to operate at full occupancy if that's what the clients want?
Right now, the real challenge is more in the full service hotels and luxury resorts. How do you operate restaurants, bars, spas, things like that, and have social distancing? And so you're having to do, again, you can't run at full occupancy in those properties because you don't have enough restaurants and bars, but and public space. But in the mainstream hotels where you have limited food and beverage services, you can run at much, much higher occupancies. And we're just trying to work as an industry to understand how do we adjust. And there's different requirements. You've got 2 meters in some markets, you've got 1 meters in other markets. We're trying to make sure we follow the CDC and the WHO guidelines. And again, I think what you're going to see is travel corridors begin to form between countries. I mean, the recovery we're seeing is principally domestic now. And then you're going to see different countries where the virus has been contained begin to let cross-border travel take place. We think you'll see that Australia, New Zealand. We think China will eventually open up to some other countries within Southern Asia as well too. There's a high demand for travel. Europe's beginning to look at that, but we have to be pretty measured to understand how do we make sure our colleagues are safe too, because again, if hotels are too busy, we do run the risk of our colleagues being exposed, so make sure they have the right equipment and they can socially distance.
Thanks. We'll come back to many of these questions. Raki, you are the CEO, Raki Phillips, of the Ras Al Khaimah Tourism Development Authority. Wonderful part of the world, and you were just getting going with huge plans, including benefiting from Expo 2020. All that now, I guess, on ice. How are you responding, and how do you see yourself trying to bounce back in through the hub that I guess is very, very, there's no place in the world that's more open than the UAE, that seems to depend more on travel and tourism. So what are you making of this, and how are you responding?
That's correct. Thanks, Ian, and thank you, gentlemen, for allowing me to be on this panel. I think you put it so perfectly. I mean, the UAE relies heavily on tourism. For an oil-rich country, the tourism makes up almost 12% of the country's GDP, and we employ close to 750,000 employees across the country. Ras Al Khaimah is the northernmost emirate. It's a little more open. It's a nature emirate, and to a lot of the points that Keith had mentioned about the resorts being busy, we're blessed to have two Ritz-Carlton villa products that, to be honest, have been pretty steadily busy since the pandemic hit. But it has had a huge negative impact on the industry. I think the biggest issue with business owners is cash flow. Their liquidity has been very tough. They've been strapped for money. And all we needed to do was really focus on the recovery process, on how we communicate the next steps. The pandemic hit us pretty badly in March. Leading up to March, the destination was, we're having record occupancies. The business was doing well. Our hotels were probably averaging in the mid 70 percentile, right? And we were looking forward to the Easter breaks and the Eid celebrations. Pandemic hit, our occupancies dropped to single digits. Some of our hotels got utilized as quarantine properties. And we went through that whole process of stopping, really trying to absorb what's happening, and then pivoting to focus on a recovery. What we felt as an emirate and as a destination to do is we had to work on creating a stimulus package that really focused on three main initiatives. One was protecting the employees that work in tourism in Ras Al Khaimah. Second was our partners and business owners and investors who've tirelessly worked to promote the destination. And the third part is make sure that the destination is ready for a recovery. And together we worked with the federal government, the Ministry of Economy, to really put some federal nationwide, emirate-wide initiatives and incentives. And we also worked on a local stimulus package that really helped move things in the right direction and to help the hotels survive during this difficult time and be ready for the recovery process. We were able to launch all of this in April, and even to some of the tour guides that you know, their business had completely stopped, we were able to give them a cash incentive to help survive and get through the process. We do remain to be optimistic. You know, these are definitely trying times. The good thing is, for all of us that work in the industry, we've been through many crises. We've been through, you know, I was in Orlando, Florida, when 9/11 hit, and obviously for a town that relies heavily on tourism, the impact was huge. We've been through SARS, terrorist attacks in other parts of the world. But the message was clear to our stakeholder, is to focus on bouncing back. Don't knee-jerk and lower rates, because that's the worst thing you can do when you're a business owner and you've been waiting for the recovery. You're waiting for things to come up. To drop average rates just to get a little bit more occupancy was not the right strategy. And we've just kept that focus, communicated well. We recently launched a campaign called the Shortcation campaign, just a little play on word. And it was very much focused on the domestic travel, people coming to RAK, spending a few nights, a minimum of 3 nights there. And we've seen great recovery. I mean, just last week, I think we averaged almost 60% at our hotels. To the point that you had mentioned earlier, we're blessed in Ras Al Khaimah because we have sprawling spaces. So we're not confined. We're able to put a lot of the measures that require safety, from social distancing measures and many of the other things, to make sure that the new customers coming on board feel very safe and are happy to travel.
Thanks very much, Raki. Dinky, you are the founding partner of Eagle Wing Estates and Hotels operator, I think based in Dubai. And you've implemented very practical financial measures for this crisis. Could you run through a couple of the really practical things that you feel people could be looking at to try and mitigate the impact and bounce back?
Thank you for having me on board. Well, we're talking about an industry at large between which employs 300 million people, out of which 100 million today have been laid off. We're talking about additional costs of $9 billion annually that are going to come up in cleanliness. What we really have looked at is bringing back expertise that will understand the domain perfectly, and getting on their knowledge to see how can we regain confidence and get people moving into the business. We've heard Raki recently talk about what he's done in Ras Al Khaimah to boost up domestic tourism. As asset managers cross-sectionally in the region, of every brand from luxury to select services, we've really having extensive dialogues with the operators to recalibrate, re-engineer the traditional cost centers that they've had and simplify them to make them fit for a reboot. I'm sure, as if Keith would allude to would admit and allude to the fact, like many other hotel brands, they themselves are shedding off traditional fats and working back on what they're compelled today to do is to make the business more meaningful. We are going deep into ensuring that when we relaunch, the owners have enough cash flow to inject, and knowing that the recovery of monies are going to take longer than ever to come through. So simplifying cash versus revenue, and working with the authorities to ensure that we don't become the policeman to start implementing what authorities need to be doing in terms of sensible social distancing or medical habits, because costs are going to become extremely important for the recovery. So we're trying to keep it simple, understand what needs to be done, ensuring that there is proper utilization of spaces within the hotels. We can't see occupancies in the Middle East coming back to where they were at least till mid-2021, if not 2022. So there'll be enough areas to ensure that demand balances out the supply. And focuses really on retaining and re-educating employees to do things in a simple manner, regain confidence, and it's going to be more than ever of personal relationships that'll matter in the reboot. We draw on strengths. I mean, I'll give you an example of Dubai. We are recalling and working with stalwarts in the industry. Look at Gerald, for example. If there's anybody who knows Dubai and who's built empire, it's flawless. His knowledge in how do you work with authorities, how do you partner with the airline to ensure that we start bringing international travelers back to Dubai. As far as I'm concerned, all the stuff about quarantine of 14 days and is going to be that's got to be reconsidered, because you want to make sure that the flights are in the aircrafts are in the air, flying internationally, to start bringing the confidence levels back. So we're really working the numbers out with the operators to ensure that they partner truly as partners and readjust all their wish lists for the property to make it more business-like, to support the business to really get financially where there is, which is going to take much longer than expected.
Thanks very much, Dinky. I'm the professor of globalization and development at Oxford University, and I've been observing these trends around the world as they impact on different countries. And I'm optimistic about the future, but particularly of travel and tourism, not so much business travel, which I think will be suffering in the long term. But I think travel and tourism will rebound, and I think what you said about 2022 is the right sort of horizon. Minister, is Kenya open at the moment? Can people still plan holidays and come there? And are you seeing international travelers, or are you worried that they're just going to bring and accelerate COVID, and so you have this terrible trade-off between lives and livelihoods?
No, not yet. We have not opened our airspace. If we open our airspace, will be probably July, mid-July. But also, it's not only about Kenya's airspace, it's globally. Most of the airspaces are not yet open. There is fear globally as well. People do not want to travel long-haul destinations, so we will be affected in Africa and any long-haul destination. So there are two things, fear, and then there's finance. People will be broke. So we'll prefer to go local and domestic, as everybody said. The domestic market will be stronger. So if the spending power and the middle class is stronger in that area, then definitely will happen. So in Kenya, we have a very strong domestic market. And unfortunately, in Africa, no. We don't have a strong domestic market. We are not used to the domestic market, as well as Africa is not homogeneous. We don't have well-connected infrastructure or connectivity for that matter. But thank God in Kenya, we are well connected. We have a big middle class. So we will survive for some time. But I agree with Dinky. I think the future for international traveler will be in 2022. End of 2021, 22, that is the future of international travel. What do we do now? I think we need to learn how to live with the COVID-19. So the protocols are very important, but the protocols need to be harmonized and be common protocols. We cannot have one protocol in the UK say quarantine 14 days, and then in Kenya is not quarantine for 14 days. I think the issue of quarantine of 14 days by the international traveler will kill tourism. So we need to find a solution together while making sure that the health measures are being taken care without killing the economy. You know, Professor, it's easy to say people are dying with or suffering because of COVID-19. But if the economy is going to be shut totally, the government cannot sustain. How much data are you going to increase into your country? Yeah, we in Kenya, we're already at 58% debt ratio. For us, it's too high. Other countries is, yes, is 200% debt ratio. But we in Kenya, 60% is too high. So we don't want to cross the 60% mark as debt ratio. But yes, we need to move the economy. What do we do? I don't think we can do much, but I think we need to be more innovative to making sure that there is other things in the tourism sector needs to be reconfigured. And yes, I think Dinky has mentioned here, yeah, the business models needs to be changing. We in Kenya, we are prepared. We are going to do a lot of intervention in terms of policies, reviews of policies. Definitely, we are going to bring innovation and technology. It has to be there. But also, sometimes we are not competitive. It has to be price and value. It cannot just be price or value. Definitely, value is important. People are becoming more conscious about it. The other issue, which is crucial for us, is the review of the tax regimes. What do we do? I mean, we are used that we just lump every tax on the tourism sector. There is no stoppage. I think we need to review it. We have inherited the colonial British tax regime and we haven't changed. I think we need to change it. So these are the things, but definitely I think the world has known we have to invest in health, safety, and security. Those are key issues. But also I think the tourism industry has been accused of over-tourism, the issue of carbon emissions. So we need to reflect ourselves and say, yes, the time of rebooting, the time of rethinking, we need to take climate change and issue of sustainability, an issue of also appreciating the local communities in those areas. We can't build 5-star hotels in 2-star communities. Those communities might feel the benefit of it. And definitely, I think if we need to reinvest back to tourism, we need the physical financial support by government to be facilitated to the investments and the opportunities that will come after COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I couldn't agree with you more on the breadth of what needs to be changed, but also the concerns around the impact on poverty and incomes. You know, I'm sure that more people will die in Africa of hunger than will die of COVID-19. And that is obviously a very, very serious question of how governments respond and manage that. You mentioned technology, and Keith, I know that you've been focusing as well on how technology might be used to help with the recovery and to manage this. Could you say something about that and how you're using technology?
Yeah, there's a couple different areas. I think first, COVID's been an accelerator, right? We had many trends in our industries that were progressing, but COVID is just pushing us to move much faster in terms of innovation and trying to tackle issues. Our ability to leverage data in a targeted way now to understand where demand is has been transformed through this process. Because as an industry, we typically would do broad and reach marketing, right? We do, media above the line, broad reach. You can't do that right now. Because none of the companies have the significant financial resources. Plus, it's a bit tone deaf. If you're going out there doing to everyone, say, please travel, when a lot of people are afraid to travel and some people can't afford to travel. But it's using the digital data that's out there now. So we're actually getting search data across so many different channels to understand, is Raki searching to go to this destination, and when is he looking at it? Who's out there wants to travel, and then making sure we're then marketing to those customers. And so the advantage you will see in marketing will be significant about this, because we're going to be very targeted, very personalized. And so in the US, for example, we saw search demand going up for the Texas and Florida Panhandle significantly over the last few weeks. And so and their drive destinations. So in the surrounding states, we're marketing that. We're seeing things begin to take place in Australia and a bit in New Zealand too. So we're figuring out how do we use data to make sure that we let customers know that hotels are open, that they're safe, what we're doing, and then also I think how do we continue to take cost out of operations for our owners? I mean, we've got to think through as an industry, how do we reduce cost, enable our hotels to operate more efficiently going forward, and because we are going to be multiple years until we recover. And I was on a call the other day with all the global CEOs, and we've all been humbled by this. We've been humbled by our colleagues, how they have just stepped up and done amazing things. It's humbled the industry because we were having arguably one of the best decades in recent memory of growth, and now it's not there. And saying, how does this industry need to repivot? Use technology to lower costs to operate, help our customers engage with us more digitally. And so I think you will see a lot of innovation take place you'll see mobile check-in, mobile checkout. You'll see a lot of things being taken out of guest rooms and delivered digitally, where in the past, I often talk about why did we put all that stuff in the hotel rooms that's always been there for decades, and going, do we still need to do that today? And we can deliver that, whether it's through the television or through the app or through their phone. So I think you'll see the industry continue to just invest in technology because it will what customers want, and customers have become much more digitally savvy in these. We're now, I think, in week 14 of working from my home here outside of London, And we can do almost everything digitally now, and customers are going to do more and more of that too. And so COVID will be an accelerator in that space, and you'll see us continue to invest more and more in technology.
Thank you. Dinky, I know you've been focusing on very specific actions to sort of try and boost revenues and cut costs, including combining functions and taking various full-time employees that were regarded as indispensable before as out of the value chain. Could you give us some examples of the sorts of actions you're undertaking to make sense of this for at least for the next couple of years? And do you think those will be permanent, or do you think this is a temporary shift in behavior?
Yeah, and I applaud Keith's two major moves in the market. One was technology, and what he highlighted was the new way of working on cost from an operator's perspective. Operators today, more than ever before, are going to relook at the fat layers that sat traditionally in an organization. They are doing what we do, and that's where the collaboration alignment between the owner and the operator is required to ensure that whatever changes they make are clear, are focused, are tangible in terms of finally adding value to the experience. Hospitality is all about selling an appropriate experience. Now, they can't, or operators should not, whilst they do this, or delayer traditional costs with the sales, marketing, technology, operations, procurement, further loaded onto an investor. This is where we've come and said, simplify them, understand why that needs to be done, how does that add value in tomorrow's world rather than yesterday, where service delivery and that personal commitment between the guest and the provider is truly recognized. And what we've done is not only multi-layering or multi-skilling or retraining between employees, and it's an educational move that we've encouraged within the industry of really studying the competency, making them true colleagues and saying, listen, if you've been working in the kitchen, why not expand your horizon and step into the restaurant? Why not do a little bit more in cashiering? Would you enjoy that? Ask a front office colleague, listen, could you manage the lounge? Would you like to do things a little different? And we are surprised at the hunger and willingness of employees themselves to upgrade. Now, what we've tried to do is, whilst we've understood operators immediately pulling out costs by putting people in furloughs or laying them off, we've asked them to relook at empowering people. We've asked them to challenge themselves on the reboot cost or on remobilization costs versus the final laying off charges that an owner picks up in his P&L. And very often we found out that a lot of these actions taken either because the investor has pushed them to do it, have not been financially prudent. Because especially in countries like the Middle East, where you've got huge cost centers in terms of visas, accommodations, etc., you lay them off today and you're going to reboot those costs or pick them up again as the industry starts. So I think what we have done is clearly re-engineered what is required for the business. With the demand being lower, how can you convert fixed into variable, and invariable costs? What are those that will matter for tomorrow's business? We all understand the first business to come back most probably is going to be business. It's going to be incentive and mice. It's going to be leisure is going to be the last. So our focus is to be, can you put your sales marketing dollars really to start getting the farmers in, getting the incentive travel going, talk to the operators, talk to the airlines. And this is where I think the operators, the airlines, the authorities have got to really recalibrate working together in terms of pulling together than they've never done before. And I think we've seen some successes with the operators. They understand it. They are challenged to really shed a lot of the fat that traditionally sat into their superstructures. And this is the best time they're going to do it. My only thing to an operator is, don't think about it. Don't take these steps just because there's a short-term impact on your P&L. Think of how you're going to build confidence, respect employees who really going to make the difference going forward, because it's going to be that personal contact through connectivity, which becomes even more important to really be the true trigger for a comeback.
Thanks very much. I'm interested that you think that business will come back before tourism, because I've been arguing the opposite, that businesses learn to work remotely and convene remotely, and it's the tourist experience that is going to drive people back first. But let's come back to that. Raki, you not far from Dubai. I've had the pleasure to visit Ras Al Khaimah and see it. Is there going to be a new market for staycations within the UAE? Will people from Dubai come on a staycation to Ras Al Khaimah to see nature and to get out? And are you seeing that sort of pick up in the nature of your client base as a result of these travel restrictions?
First of all, Ian, I hope you enjoyed your stay with us in Ras Al Khaimah.
I very much so.
So in Ras Al Khaimah, we are the #1 option for staycations. So even before the pandemic, 40% of our customers come from the domestic market and 60% flying internationally. And we're very diversified from our international customer base. We are located 45 minutes outside of Dubai International Airport, so it is quite convenient. We do see that the recovery process will come in different phases, and as everyone's been talking, the initial phase definitely is the domestic market. And this is why we recently launched our shortcation campaign, and very much focused on getting people to come out, enjoy time in nature, reconnect with people, maybe stay in one of our villa properties or stay in one of our hotels. But for us as a destination, the domestic traveler has very different needs than the international traveler. I'll give you an example. One of our hotels was very much an all-inclusive destination, the Rixus, an ultra all-inclusive destination. Had the process down. You come, you get your wristband, and everything's included in there. So what we did is, based on the recommendations that came from the World Health Organization, we stopped serving buffets. And buffet is great when you're in an all-inclusive resort, but the domestic traveler doesn't look for a buffet experience. They look for a dine-in experience. So we have to work with the hotels in order to do that. And we put some guidelines together, but then we realized we created our Stay Safe Hotel certification, and we worked on a sterilization program. All of the employees had to get COVID tested before the hotel operates fully. We had dedicated entrances to mitigate the flow, and we put restrictions on capacity of how much. The service at the hotel, and Keith would know this, is still warm and friendly, but it's covered with a mask, and there's smiles behind those masks. But in order to take things to the next level and really build the confidence of the employees, we partnered up with Bureau Veritas, and we were the first tourism board to do that, to become a Bureau Veritas certified destination. So all of our hotels are going through that certification. It's a globally recognized certification, and it honestly came under the recommendation of WTTC, who we're very involved in, to look how we can take a global pandemic and really use the response locally. We are a developing destination, so it's easy for us to be able to move fast, to have an impact very quickly, and I'm happy to say that things have been looking positive. I am cautiously optimistic, but I still have that optimism that things will get better.
Right. Well, it's important to be optimistic. We have about 5 minutes. I don't know whether the organizers have any questions from other participants that would like to pose to the panel. If not, do the panelists have questions for each other?
I do.
Yeah.
And my question is to Keith. While Keith, you would most probably agree with me that in order for investors, hotel owners to go through this journey, they will be seeking a far more collaborative approach with operators such as yourself in order to break the traditional mold of fees and deliverables, including brand standards. Now, when we talk to owners and we see a diminishing return on the assets, and this is cross-sectionally from luxury to select services, one of the things that we are challenged by owners is that which is the normal, that what we pay in terms of fees to what we should be actually getting back from operator don't stack up. Now, we all realize that an operator is there because he provides an international deliverable, not only the name, and there's a cost attached to it, and there are fees which come for providing of the services. However, my question directly is, have you started engaging with owners of relooking at fees and pegging it to financial performance or returns? And is there any mitigation steps on inducements during this period where owners are struggling?
Sure. Excuse me. Let me approach it in 3 different ways. Let me talk about how we've helped owners today, and then how we're thinking about working with owners going forward. So when this happened, we went out to our owners in the biggest markets and said, we recognize that liquidity is the biggest issue you're facing. And so how can we help you? And so we cut marketing assessments, we cut technology fees, we just rolled many of those things back. We also delayed payments back, of saying we recognize at the depth of this crisis, before government support came about, what can we do to help? And effectively is let us use our balance sheet effectively to carry, to cut the costs that are coming out of the hotels. And it was incredibly well received. And so we had a number of owners around the world basically said, yep, I appreciate you cutting marketing assessments. I appreciate you cutting technology. Then we have all the above property costs as well too, right? So things where they're paid for services, where that services are no longer needed. And we cut those back. But we've also said, is there a different way of pricing this going forward, a different level of service, different pricing model, and working with the owners on that. Additionally, brand standards. We basically pull back on brand standards across almost all of our brands, saying, recognize we have to lower the cost to operate. And now we have to have a conversation as what should come back in. So should some of these changes now be permanent? Of saying, we're rethinking about how we operate the hotel. Is that brand standard adding value? And so we've got a team going through right now for all of our brands going, we've added more and more for customers over the past decade across all the brands. We've taken those things back now. Do they really, what adds value, what doesn't? And so looking at that too. And so I think you'll continue to see us looking at how do we continue to drive owners' returns, because that's how, for all the big global hotel companies, we're asset light. We only grow through the billions of dollars of capital being deployed by owners around the world to build these great hotels and these great destinations. And coming into this, I told our team, we've got a number of stakeholders. We've got owners, colleagues, customers, shareholders, and governments, and they all have long memories. And so how we act throughout this crisis and how we treat them is going to be pivotal to how we come out of this. And so if we're not seen as doing the right thing, both today and for the future, by any of those constituents, we hurt our business. And so we have to be a better partner. We have to collaborate and make sure that we're setting this industry up for success. And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll turn it back to the professor, is we've got to work with governments around the world, and we have to work with destination management organizations and airlines and so forth. We have to come together as an industry to help governments understand the value we're adding, because there's been a real failure of leadership in government around the world. We have to be honest about it. And so business leaders now have an heightened responsibility in a world where globalization feels like it's pulling back a bit, to make sure that we are a globally connected industry, and how do we help push things forward.
Thank you,
Thanks
Keith.
very much. And I couldn't have put it more precisely as the professor of globalization than Keith has. That globalization needs to be sustained, and governments are not taking the lead that they should, not least internationally, in support of others. I want to thank the panelists. It's been a fabulous panel, learned a lot, and hand back to the organizers right on time. So thanks to all of you for participating in this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.